This is Viewpoint with Chris Pierce. Today's program has been underwritten by Bodiato Real Estate, providing personal and professional real estate service since 1987. For all your real estate needs, call Diane Bodiato at 402-690-4769. Linda McDermott with Fricke & Associates is an independent insurance representative helping you with personal and business insurance as well as your long-term care, life, health, and retirement needs. Come join the conversation at PoliticalInsidersReport.com, Nebraska's source for local politics. And now, here's our host, Chris Pierce.
Good morning, Nebraska, and welcome to Viewpoint. I'm your host, Chris Pierce. We're back here at the Milton Abrahams Public Library here at 90th and Fort. It's been a great location, and make sure you check out your local libraries. You know, one of the hot topics, both at the national and local level for several years now, has been immigration. Rather, it's been how to reform our nation's immigration policy. The issues of legal and illegal immigration, amnesty, pathways to citizenship seem to be a daily story in the news. Now it's time for Viewpoint's turn to join this ever-expanding conversation, a conversation that truly needs more than just a one-hour show. Joining our conversation this morning will be Jeremy Aspen, local radio talk show host on KOIL, 1290, Reynaldo Cervantes, and Marty Brown, who's Vice President of Nebraska Taxpayers for Freedom and their director of their immigration project. A little later, I'll be joining Shirley Mora James, an immigration attorney from Lincoln. You know, given the recent events right here in Nebraska in the legislature and the upcoming governor's race, Viewpoint reached out to State Senator Jansen's Senate office and his campaign office to invite the senator to be part of this conversation, given how immigration is a major pillar in the senator's campaign. After conversations with both his staff and delaying taping in hopes to accommodate the senator, we're informed that Senator Jansen decided to not be part of this important discussion. You know, immigration is a subject sure to raise the passion of almost every Nebraskan, whether you're for it, against it, or, well, there's some facts that we just can't deny. You know, Hispanics and Asians immigrants make up almost 7% of Nebraska's population, and more than a third of them are naturalized U.S. citizens. According to the U.S. Census, the Nebraska Hispanic population has increased 70% from 2000 to 2010. Hispanics are the fastest growing population group in the U.S. and Nebraska. 1 in 9 Nebraskans are Hispanic or Asian. In 2009, 85% of children with immigrant parents were U.S. citizens. 87 were Asians. 92 were with Hispanic families. Undocumented immigrants make up only 2.4% of the state's population. That's about 45,000 people. And that's according to the 2010 Pew Hispanic Center report. Immigrants not only contribute to the state's economy as workers, but also account for tens of millions of dollars in tax revenue and consumer purchasing power. Moreover, Hispanics and Asians, both foreign-born and native-born, wield approximately $5 billion in consumer spending power. The businesses they own had sales of more than $1.2 billion, employing around 9,000 Nebraskans. In an economy such as ours in this present state, Nebraska cannot afford to ignore this value component of its labor, tax, and business community. You know, for the 2011-2012 academic years, NAFSA, the financial aid agency, reported that 4,372 foreign students contributed $98.3 million to this state's economy in tuition, fees, and living expenses. 66% of new Americans, those that have become citizens, have a high school degree or GED. In Nebraska, 75% of children with immigrant parents are English proficient, according to the Urban Institute data from 2009. And on June 27th of this year, the U.S. Senate approved an immigration reform package negotiated by a bipartisan gang of 8. The vote was 68-32, with all the Democrats and 14 Republicans voting. The measure now goes to the U.S. House, where Speaker John Boehner has said that without overwhelming Republican support, he will not bring that bill to the floor. That was a lot to chew on, and that's a lot of information. That's just Nebraska. So now it's time to bring the Nebraska point of view forward, and I'm joined right now by Jeremy Aspen. I don't know why I said Aspen. That's somebody else I know.
They came over on the boat.
That's right. And of course, Reynaldo Cervantes, both community activists. Jeremy, We said a mouthful.
Yeah, and actually you said just about everything I would have said.
Okay, thank you for coming.
I appreciate you having me.
But you know, the interesting thing, those were just Nebraska stats that we found. That had nothing to do with some of the other things that are going on.
Well, a lot of the arguments, yeah, they try to bring in numbers like that, and they're substantial and important. Another number is that just Social Security alone, illegal immigrants specifically, contributed about $11 billion, and that's a benefit that they can expect to not receive ever in their life, unless they become citizens of the United States. That's essentially gifted money.
Now, Reynaldo, he just mentioned benefits, and there's been a lot of talk about benefits. Nebraska just passed a law, and actually has had many laws prepared about housing, about secondary education, for those that are undocumented but probably have been here most of their lives. Is Nebraska, are we about where the rest of the country is, or are we out of step with the rest of the country?
No, actually, I think Nebraska is far ahead of many of the states regarding like the Dreamers Act, where they've enacted legislation that allows the individuals who are not documented to go to school with paying in-state tuition. Mm-hmm. So in that respect, they're ahead of many other states. We're very lucky that our state unicameral has been against the wishes of the governor. They've gone ahead and overridden his veto regarding the in-state tuition fee. And the other issue is like the prenatal care issue, and
that was actually a very hot topic.
It was.
Jeremy, the governor said that he's absolutely was going to veto that. He tried, he did, but overwhelmingly was overridden.
Yeah, and thank goodness. I mean, if there's one group of innocent people, it's the babies that are not born yet.
And that seems to be a central theme when we talk about immigration. We've actually got to break that down, I think, into two separate issues. One is undocumented workers who come without families, but then you have to deal with either A, they come with families, children, or they have children in the country. Plyler versus Doe back in 1975 said that K through 12 education could not be denied even for illegal children of illegal immigrants who were also undocumented. So I think we sort of separate ourselves when we talk about workers and then when we talk about families. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, but I think that creates part of the conundrum. That creates part of the problem, because on one hand, you have the educational system that has to provide an education for people, individuals that are not documented, without really admitting to that, and them having to deal with the parents who are undocumented, who are being dealt with by the federal government, and having to deal with the shadow issue, having to remain in the shadows, but yet having to be a part of that system that says you need a family unit in order to be successful in school. And so you have the conundrum on behalf of the Omaha public school system, for example, that says that one of the reasons we have such a high dropout rate is the fact that we don't have enough family input. Mm-hmm. And so the families actually are afraid to get involved in many instances because they don't want to come out there and actually get involved because they don't know who to trust.
But why should my tax dollars, and this is a bit of a sticky issue for me, why should my tax dollars go to benefit those that are not U.S. citizens? And we could use school education as an example, but I'm a little soft on that. But let's talk about being able to, as an undocumented illegal immigrant, however we want to talk, there's so many different ways to say that, allow driver's license. Now, that, in my opinion, is the state recognizing that this person is an illegal resident of our state, but we don't care, we're going to give them a driver's license. To me, that doesn't make any sense.
I think everything kind of hinges on this idea that illegal alien is somehow or is at least posited as some sort of an infraction on humanity, and a lot of the discussion hinges on it because I think part of it's just framing the issue with the as illegal immigration really kind of puts the onus back on defenders of immigration policy. So to make it illegal, you'd have to accept that an illegal, the posited illegal, the posited law is good.
Yeah,
so,
but the law, there is a law. There is a way. If you want to come into our country, there's various ways to do it. You can be a tourist. You can come on business. You can get various different types of work visas. So there is a legal way to come into our country. What we're talking about are people that come outside those boundaries and decide to come in a way that is not within our process.
But here, let me throw this out at you. So it's an illegal action to cross an arbitrary line. So, in order for us to make it legal, this is highlighting the weakness of that argument. Let's change the law and not make it illegal. I mean, it's not a foundational issue that we're talking about. It's not an infraction of any sort of natural law that we're going off of. And a lot of the decisions treat illegality like we would taking drugs or shooting somebody in the head or something. It's not the same thing. And I think the crux of the matter is that.
But Reynaldo, but the argument to that is these and we have to be very, very clear. These are, it seems that everyone thinks that illegal immigrants come across the southern border. In fact, that's not true. In fact, there are less of the Pew Research found based on the U.S. Census that Mexico, and if you take Mexico and Central and South America, only bring together about 76% of those illegal or undocumented people in the country. So, but I think society, a lot of people are saying, wait a minute, they're taking advantage of all of our social issues, they're taking advantage of a lot of different things that we have to pay into, but they don't. They kind of,
Well, yeah, but I want to go back to.
Oh, you want to go back?
3 questions ago.
All right. You know what? We're going to come back to your question.
Actually, it's your question.
No, we're going to come back to your question. We're going to come right back with Jeremy and Reynaldo. Will be right back.
All right.
Do you know about 211? It's help for an elderly relative or a troubled teen, family counseling, or job training. Instead of hunting for phone numbers, dial 211. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, talk to someone who will find the local information you need. United Way and its statewide partners want you to get connected and get answers. Dial 211 or go online at ne211.org.
The Midwest Ovarian Cancer Association mission is to support women diagnosed with ovarian cancer, to educate the public about the disease, and to support research. Currently, most women diagnosed with ovarian cancer have advanced disease and require prolonged medical treatment. Our goal at MOCA is to see fewer women diagnosed in advanced stages and to assure all women the availability of support and access to information. Please support these efforts by liking us on Facebook.
Welcome back to Viewpoint. Again, we're going to make a blooper tape of our between shots because I try to get Reynaldo to tell me what he wants to talk about. He won't tell me.
I forgot.
So this has now become the Reynaldo Cervantes show. All right, I told you I was going to come back to you. You had something you wanted to come up to.
Well, you actually posed 3 questions in a rapid fire, which is really very good. You stated that why should you as an American put your tax dollars towards paying for services?
Well, that's an argument that people have is we, as citizens, we're paying into the system, but we have people who aren't part of the system.
Okay, and the inference is that these individuals don't pay taxes.
Okay.
Okay, and that's not true.
Okay.
And I think your introduction spoke to that issue as to how much they contribute to the economy. It's like if you listen to the rhetoric, these individuals don't pay any taxes at all. They don't pay into the system. They don't pay sales tax. They don't pay
so how do they pay in the system besides sales tax?
Well, gas tax. They even pay Social Security tax. They pay all kinds of taxes. They may not get credit for it.
Sales tax, property tax, and if they pay the rent, they're still having to.
Now, how are they paying property tax?
Because there's a property owner that has to pay property taxes on it, and they're definitely paying
as a renter.
The cost. As a renter.
Well, and it's just like an undocumented worker would go to, or an individual would go to the service station. He put in his gas. Gas comes up to $25. 50% is taxes, and so when he goes to pay, He's expected to only pay $10. Why? Because he's not documented, and therefore he's not paying taxes. So he says no.
Is that like the Hy-Vee?
Yeah. And so he can't get away with it, or she can't get away. So that's the point.
So you're saying, and when you say Social Security, so I'm going to make an assumption here. Correct me if I'm wrong. So we've got undocumented workers. If they're paying to Social Security, it means they have a job, which means they probably have false documents to have a Social Security number.
Yes.
All right. Shouldn't I'm going to pose a question, but shouldn't the government cue into that, hey, we have a Social Security number that doesn't exist, but they're paying us money?
Yeah.
Shouldn't that cue them on that person?
Absolutely.
But yet we don't do anything.
No.
Okay.
No, that's the enforcement component. That's the enforcement.
Okay.
That's right.
Yeah, no. See, that's the reality. The reality on the ground is that we have so many million undocumented individuals here, and all of the focus is on the victims, I would say.
We actually have, as of 2011, we have 11.1 million.
Okay, we have that many millions of undocumented workers. How can they exist in a society if they're working? We have so many down in South Omaha. They're obviously paying all these different taxes. They're contributing to the economy, and they're working somewhere. But yet nothing is said about the individuals that are employing them. They're not having to pay anything. And I remember a while back, this guy who ran for Congress, Tom White, is his name White? I remember listening to him on the floor of the legislature when he got mad at his cohorts up there. He says, you know what? If you guys don't do something, so I'm going to reveal the fact that the employers are getting away with not paying, not identifying these individuals undocumented, and they're creating all these burdens to the community. These individuals are coming in here and having they get welfare and all this, and people, all the community is taking on the burden of the services that you bring into the community by hiring them. Yet you're not being held accountable.
But Jeremy, he brings up a good point because, well, if they have a job, if they have a Social Security number, there's an employer behind that, and the employer has to know. Is there a way that employer would not know?
Now, going back to the 1986 amnesty, it is actually illegal to treat, for instance, a Hispanic differently, of course, than a Caucasian. You can't ask questions. Essentially, that law was designed so that you couldn't ask to see if they were, or validate to make sure that they were legal.
They can ask the question if they're a U.S.
If they ask every single person.
Right. Well, Jeremy, that's where we talk about special interest. Okay.
That's right. The
people who write the laws. Because we talk about burden of proof. The burden of proof that was written into the law is so scant that if they only have to ask certain questions and they're within the law, they're within the law. Right. So if they only have to say, what's your name, Roberto? Are you an American? Yep. And you have no more burden,
that's right.
No more further burden to prove it. Then you're legal.
But again, I guess I'm gonna have to argue with that. As if I was a business owner and I employed people, so long as I ask the question, I'm not the one breaking the law. So why should I be held accountable for someone else breaking the law?
No, but that's the issue. What is the burden? At what point do you break the law?
All right.
Ronald Reagan was not willing to forfeit or give in to the idea that the federal government was the appropriate mechanism the federal government was not going to get in the way of kind of a free market approach at labor. So the reason that loophole exists, I think, was mostly because of Ronald Reagan, in that he didn't want the federal government to say what employers could do. It's perfectly consistent with what would have been the old-fashioned Ronald conservatism.
Okay, but let's be honest, because one of the things that we saw were, two things. One, the jobs that undocumented workers take, Americans won't do. But is that really true? Really? If we got rid of all the illegal undocumented workers in this country, would Americans step up and do those jobs?
I don't know, but can I go back?
I'll answer that question.
We have 20 seconds.
That's
what he said.
What's implied, okay, something that's important to understand is that labor is not a zero-sum game. By us having people that are willing to work for a little bit less money here in the United States.
Yeah, that's capitalism.
All right, well, we're going to be back. We're going to bring up our next guest, which is Marty Brown. He is the Vice President of the Nebraska Taxpayers for Freedom, and he's also the Director of their immigration project. We're going to have a one-on-one with Marty. I'm sure he's got a different view on this. I'm glad that he does, because we need to have both sides. And then we'll bring you guys back, and we could talk about some of these other things, but we'll be right back.
50 years!
The Boys and Girls Club of the Midlands
I've been helping kids like me. Like me.
like us.
For just $30 a year, I can get
A healthy meal.
homework help, exercise, a safe place to stay after school, everything. At one of our 8 clubs. My name is Janelle.
And I am the Boys and Girls Club.
The Boys and Girls Club. We are the Boys and Girls Club! Like us on Facebook at BGC Midlands. Cox will donate $1 to the Boys and Girls Club.
Do you know about 211? It's help for an elderly relative or a troubled teen, family counseling, or job training. Instead of hunting for phone numbers, dial 211. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, talk to someone who will find the local information you need. United Way and its statewide partners want you to get connected and get answers. Dial 211 or go online at ne211.org.
Welcome back to Viewpoint. I'm your host, Chris Pierce. We're at the Milton Abrahams Library here at 9th and Fort, and we've got our new guest, Marty Brown. He is the Vice President of Nebraskans Taxpayers for Freedom. He's also the project manager for their Project Immigration. Right, Marty? Right. And Marty, I know you've got a much different view on immigration, and I'm glad you could be here tonight.
Well, it was good to be here, Chris. I appreciate the offer.
One question I want to pose to you, and actually this was some research that we found, and I'm actually a little astonished by it, but we always focus, when we talk about immigration, and it's just something I think we naturally do, is we think of the southern border. For some reason we do that. But we found that, according to the Pew Research Center, that actually there's been a decrease. In fact, there were more people that left the U.S. to go back to Mexico than actually came from Mexico to the U.S. So illegal immigration from Mexico is on the downturn. It has been for about the last 4 years. Is that a good thing? And if it is or isn't, why or why not?
Depends on who you're looking at as far as those statistics. I don't agree with them.
Okay. Why not?
Well,
I mean, I can tell you their source is a combination between the U.S. Census Bureau and the Mexican Census Bureau.
Well, let's ask the U.S. Border Patrol. Okay. Let's ask INS or any of those people, the ICE agency. We realize that here in Douglas County, we're being deducted $3 million, over $3 million, because they're not picking up illegals. Okay.
Now, why don't you go into a little more about that?
Well, I looked at the budget.
Who's the $3 million coming from?
Well, from the INS.
Okay.
From the federal government.
Okay.
And the law was passed down by Obama that it states that they have to have 3 misdemeanors before they're picked up. Okay? Mm-hmm. So what happens in Douglas County, we have all these correction officers that normally are employed, and because of the $3 million shortfall that we're going to have this year, they're going to have to be unemployed.
So let me see if I understand. We'll make sure I understand this. So we're not talking about if they're picked up because they're an undocumented immigrant, but they can't be picked up unless they have 3 misdemeanors first?
Right.
So, but
you or I, that wouldn't happen. Just because they're an immigrant, they get 3 misdemeanors before they're actually incarcerated.
And when you say immigrant, you're talking about an undocumented?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. So what do you think is it a border security problem? I mean,
it's interior. It's interior.
Well, and we found that a lot of the actual undocumented immigrants that a vast, I'm not going to say majority, but a good chunk of them are actually people that came here legally but just decided to overstay.
Yeah, there's 40% of the visas are overstays. Now, we don't know who these people are. We can't find them. There's about 6 million of them in the United States. They're going about their business. In fact, the hijackers that bombed our trade centers and our Twin Towers came on a visa. One was school. 2 of them came for agricultural work, and so they worked on bean farm. I mean, it's all documented on the 9/11 Commission.
Well, I know that one of them was actually on a valid visa,
Right.
but he broke the conditions of that visa because he went to flight school.
Yes.
But I mean, he was actually a legal visa holder, but
Right.
because I guess there's
For 6
rules.
months.
Right, there's rules that you can't.
You have to renew that every 6 months.
So, if it's not, you're saying it's an internal issue. What do we do? You know, if we can wave a magic wand and we can find a system that we can get rid of undocumented workers,
Well,
whether it be, you know, they leave the country, or we have, you know, the immigration bill, the path to citizenship.
okay.
If we can make those things work, do we have a solution, or is that not really the
Not
solution?
the way it's formed right now. To
Okay.
give you an instance, we had the privilege to invite a foreign exchange student from Germany to our house to live for a year. Okay? The documentation for that, we set for a 3-hour interview. Okay? She sent us the application for her to be in the United States. It tells us what her parents did for a living. It tells us what her studies were, her grades were, how many shots they had. It tells her dentist report, what her goals were, and so forth. And
But again, let's
what I'm getting
well,
at.
let's go back to.
Wait a minute. What I'm getting at is anyone that's here undocumented needs to go through this process.
But isn't there a process with the pathway to citizenship to where there's a background check? There is fines imposed, there's back taxes that
No,
be paid,
let's
and
go
there's
back.
a waiting period.
No, we got to go one-on-one.
Okay.
It's not just a telephone or a fax. We got to sit down like you and I and find out who that person is.
Yeah, but is that plausible? And I'm just saying that because of the sheer number. I mean, we're talking
It can be done. Eisenhower did it. Okay,
about
55.
smaller numbers.
Well, yeah, but we can do it by state. We start with Nebraska, the smaller
Now, is
population.
every state going to have the same standards?
Yes.
Okay.
It'll be by federal law.
Okay.
But we got to interview, document them. I don't care if they're documented and they can show legal cause and that they're not a criminal or a rapist or a murderer. I have no problem.
So you're not necessarily against a pathway to citizenship, but you think there needs to be probably more detail in that pathway, information.
It has to be.
Okay.
It has to be.
Because we definitely want to know who our citizens are, because
I wouldn't-
we're all documented, aren't we?
Yes.
Okay.
I can give you my
understand that
record
point.
from 1692.
Well, that's a long time ago. So, but let's talk about one quick thing, and we're probably going to carry it on to the next segment. But we talked about a little bit about the jobs. If there was a way we got rid of all the undocumented, like they were just no longer here.
Well, here we are. Here we are in North Omaha. Okay, 28% unemployment. South Omaha is growing. Okay? I think the reason is because of taxes. All right? And to document that, you know, we had a lot of hail damage in Omaha. 11,000
My
homes.
roof's getting replaced.
I got $13,000 damage. Okay? I had to call 12 people to get all-American crew at my home. Now, I wanted to make sure they spoke English, they had a supervisor in hand, and they didn't pay by 1099.
All right, we got to take a break, but I want to pick up when Jeremy and Reynaldo come back. I want to talk about English and proficiency, because that's a major. It's both. I think a lot of people think it's a necessity, but it's also an obstacle. So we'll be right back.
My son, the Cub Scout, helped raise money to make camping safer.
My son, the Cub Scout, stood up to the school bully.
My son, the Cub Scout, volunteers at the homeless shelter.
My sons, the Boy Scouts, helped clean up after the devastating flood.
My son, the Eagle Scout, helped save a man's life.
My sons, the Eagle Scouts, are defending our nation.
My son, the Eagle Scout, became a doctor,
Civil engineer,
police chief,
wonderful husband and father,
State Senator.
JoinScouting2012.org.
For 45 years, Family Housing Advisory Services has been improving quality of life by helping people achieve housing and financial stability. FAS prevents homelessness, educates homeowners, provides foreclosure prevention options, develops financially wise consumers, offers affordable mortgage lending options, eliminates housing discrimination, and reduces poverty. Programs and services include homebuyer education, tenant services, financial management, tax assistance, homeowner finance, and fair housing. For more information, call 402-934-7921.
Welcome back, and we are joined. Marty and I are joined by our former friends. Well, actually, not former friends, former guests. Don't want to make any accusations. Jeremy Aspen and Reynaldo Cervantes. Guys, I would be remiss if we didn't talk about the King, Representative Steve King's statement. I want to read it, and I'm going to just read it verbatim. This is his quote. For everyone, and he's talking about illegal immigrants, for everyone who's a valedictorian, there's another 100 out there that weigh 130 pounds, and they've got calves the size of cantaloupes because they're hauling 75 pounds of marijuana across the desert. Those people would be legalized with the same act, and he's talking about the immigration law. I don't even know where to start and who to go to, because
this is from a party who is doing everything it can to reach out to my party, the Republican Party, doing everything it can to reach out to the Hispanic community. The problem with a statement like what Congressman King has said, it really sets us back. I mean, we've been active in trying to get Hispanics involved, trying to get the conservative message out. And this is detrimental. And it's almost reason enough to just give up on the immigration issue.
And we could share that both Representative Speaker Boehner and Majority Leader Cantor have.
Right, yeah. Which was fantastic.
I don't think I've seen two people run so fast in my life.
No, it was a good thing to run from.
Marty, does this kind of comment just tell us there's no way to get true immigration reform of any kind to the House?
I don't think it's going to happen.
You don't think it's going to happen?
No.
In any way, fashion?
No. No. The reason being is, we all have statistics, okay? It's hard to back them up sometimes, because we don't have them documented. Okay, so it's a hard game that they're playing, and due to the fact that it's happened since 1986 and things have changed over the years, they still haven't got it right. And I think the biggest problem is, we're a different country. We have our Constitution to rely on. That separates us from Mexico, Germany, Italy. We have to rely on our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. And if we don't go by those and by our laws, then everything else is thrown out.
But what could be a surprise that the federal government has screwed even this issue up? I mean, they have an abhorrible record.
Reynaldo, he brings a point. He talks about the Constitution, but let's go back to the very beginning. We were created as immigrants. I mean, the only ones that weren't immigrants were the American Indians. Everyone else is an immigrant. So our country's founded on immigrants, but yet we seem to have a problem with immigration.
I just want to give you a little background on myself. I'm third generation American. Actually, I can trace back my roots on my mom's side back to the 1400s. And I've never considered myself anything other than an American. And so when I look at my history, I see where my people were colonized. I consider myself a Native American. So when I look at this issue, I look at it purely from a political perspective. So when I answer your question with respect to whether or not the immigration reform bill will pass, I say no. And the reason I say that is purely because all politics is local. You have a national movement which is predicated on the national, the winning of a presidency, which took into the demographics a lot of the Hispanic vote and the black vote. But now that it's getting into the House, you have more a localized issue. And because it's local, you don't have the numbers. You don't have the House of Representative numbers sufficient enough to pass the immigration bill, and so you won't.
You brought up citizenship. You brought up voting, and one of the I think both parties are really working hard at the Hispanic community because it is the largest growing population we have, and they're a huge voting bloc. If we can get them documented, like Marty says, and get them registered to vote and to vote. But when we talk about, and I want to bring back language, because the Pew Research did a study in 2012. It said 93% of Hispanic immigrants would like to become U.S. citizens, but there's the number one obstacle in their eyes was the language barrier, with number two being the cost, which is $680 for citizenship. Language is a problem. I mean, I can remember years ago where, if you're an American, you speak American. We didn't even say English back then. We said American. But Marty, what do we do about that? I mean, should language be a requirement to be a citizen?
I believe so, because the communication level. If I'm going to talk with a gentleman here, I need to be able to communicate with him. And English is universal language all over the world. You go to Germany from a foreign exchange student, and you go to Puerto Rico, English is well known in the universe, and it is, and it's the number one language.
But I will say, and I did not know this, there's actually 30 different dialects in the Hispanic community alone. They're not all Spanish. Yeah. And I thought that was quite interesting. So Jeremy, how do we get over the language barrier? Either they're saying that English is too hard. If I got to be a citizen, I got to learn English. So you just right there tell me I can't be a citizen.
Yeah, I mean the nice thing I guess about making these laws, we can make whatever rules we want. I myself as an individual, I don't care what language people speak. You can speak whatever you want. Now, what I'm also opposed to is having to finance 212 different documents, or for different languages. But when it comes right to the language and that would be a requirement, I'm a free market guy. I believe that a free market helps to determine the way people comport themselves. And
so you're saying it's their responsibility, whether
that's right.
Being able to rent, sign a lease, it's their responsibility to be able to comprehend.
That's right. Or get the help that they need in order to accomplish whatever they're setting out to do.
Is that too high of a standard?
No, the natural assimilation process takes care of it.
That's right.
The natural assimilation, one generation, like your generation at some point spoke the language of your great-grandparents or whatever, eventually it turned out to be English. Now, I just never...
Or Irish. Or that's English.
Gaelic.
I just think it's a natural assimilation process. You shouldn't get hung up on that.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you guys for coming. Jeremy Aspen, Marty Brown, and Reynaldo.
Thanks for having me.
Like I said at the beginning show, this is not a show that we could ever do in an hour. I want to appreciate those guys. When we come back, I'll be with
Cheryl Mora.
Yes, Shirley Mora James. She's an immigration attorney in Lincoln, and we're going to be focusing on the Fremont law about undocumented immigrants not being able to have a place to live. So it's a touch and go issue, but she's really active in that.
Thanks,
so we'll be right back.
Hope to see you in my show one of these days.
Well, I'll be there. I'm coming. Ratings go through the roof. We'll be back, guys.
The Midwest Ovarian Cancer Association mission is to support women diagnosed with ovarian cancer, to educate the public about the disease, and to support research. Currently, most women diagnosed with ovarian cancer have advanced disease and require prolonged medical treatment. Our goal at MOCA is to see fewer women diagnosed in advanced stages and to assure all women the availability of support and access to information. Please support these efforts by liking us on Facebook.
50 years!
The Boys and Girls Club of the Midlands
Have been helping kids like me. Like me.
Like us.
For just $30 a year, I can get
A healthy meal.
homework help, exercise, a safe place to stay after school, everything. At one of our 8 clubs. My name is Janelle.
And I am the Boys and Girls Club.
The Boys and Girls Club. We are the Boys and Girls Club! Like us on Facebook at BGC Midlands. Cox will donate $1 to the Boys and Girls Club.
Welcome back. We've had a great conversation with Marty Brown, Jeremy Aspen, and Reynaldo Cervantes. Right now we're with Shirley Mora James. She's an immigration attorney here in Lincoln. And Shirley, I want to thank you for allowing us to come down to your office. I know you've got a busy schedule. But the important reason I wanted you here is because what you can share with us is some of the after effects and how it affects undocumented workers or even their families once some of these laws, whether it be the new immigration law or maybe the Fremont law or some others. You really can help us understand that whole process. So first of all, what is, because you practice immigration law, what does that mean? What kind of things do you have to deal with?
Well, let's talk about families and mixed status families. I recently had an 8-year-old U.S. citizen. Her mother's and her father is undocumented. I have a little girl in my office crying her eyes out because she's afraid that someone's going to take her daddy away from her. And people forget that we're talking about families. We're talking about U.S. citizens and the repercussions on that family. And we pride ourselves on being a country that promotes family values. But yet, when it comes to mixed status families, unfortunately, our current immigration law does not consider.
And that seems to be, in our conversation earlier today, was that's sort of where the line's kind of drawn. When we talk about immigration, we talk about deportation, we talk about this, is the difference between an individual worker, undocumented worker, and then when we get to the family status, when we get into the repercussions on the children, whether they were born in the United States, which means they're automatic citizens, so they're automatic citizens, but their family, their parents aren't. They're two different statuses. Or they were brought here at a very, very young age. They've lived here forever. That seems to be, when we talked about earlier, a dividing line of when the attitude seems to change. Pro-immigration, they think they need to be documented or they need to be deported.
Not necessarily.
Really?
I mean, there are individuals that, unfortunately, in this state, that have no compassion for the young ones that were brought here as toddlers and babies. Called dreamers. And, because we do need immigration reform, our president seen a need to inspect these children, which includes a criminal background check. They had to be either a high school graduate or a GD graduate. They had to go to and graduate from an American school, high school. They had to have no criminal history. In other words, they had to be beyond what we expect from our U.S. citizen children.
But some people would say, shouldn't they be expected to go that extra step because they're not U.S. citizens? It's sort of, in some instances, some people say they have to prove that they want to be a U.S. citizen, so they're sort of being asked to jump through these hoops. But some of these hoops, I think you would agree, are a little bit, I guess, unachievable. Would you agree with that?
Well, as far as the DACA requirements, which is the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and that's the dreamers, children that were brought here as children. These kids are absolutely the top, the cream of the crop. And we're talking about a lot of college, either bound or in college right now, or college graduates, and having to go through a process. That's fair. We need to know who they are and the fact that they are excellent citizen prospects.
And that seems to be the issue when people say the immigration bill that was proposed by the Gang of Eight, there's amnesty. But in reality, that's not true, because amnesty means free. It means no repercussions. But in that bill, there's a lot of hoops and steps that they have to go through in order to get to that point. And one being, in the line, long periods of time to fines and the repayment of back taxes. So how would you answer people who say, no, this is just another amnesty bill like in 1986?
It isn't. Even what's even more troubling for me, since I do deal with a lot of mixed status families, is the new proposed Gang of Eight legislation. Denies the opportunity of brothers and sisters to bring their brothers and sisters here. Now imagine if you have a sister or brother who has mental retardation, cognitive deficits so severe that they cannot support themselves, and mom and dad are living in Mexico and pass away, and so you have this brother or sister who may have an IQ of 5 that needs to be taken care of. and the brother wants to bring that family member over so that they can care for him. Under the new legislation, they would not.
Right. So they kind of being forced to either A, stay in the United States and abandon their family, or go back, which means they probably would be able to come back to the United States.
No, for them to be able to bring them over, they have to be either a permanent legal resident or a U.S. citizen. Even a U.S. citizen would not be able to bring a sibling over with the new proposed Gang of 8 legislation. That's pretty harsh.
That actually is.
What about people with disabilities? It's ironic that they're usually the last people that are recognized in any kind of legislation.
Well, we're going to get more to that, and I want to talk about some of the laws. I know we have to be limited what we can talk about Fremont, but I know you have some other examples. So the legal ramifications for undocumented workers and their families when it comes to illegal immigration policy. We'll be right back.
50 years!
The Boys and Girls Club of the Midlands
I've been helping kids like me. Like me.
like us.
For just $30 a year, I can get
A healthy meal.
homework help, exercise, a safe place to stay after school, everything. At one of our 8 clubs. My name is Janelle.
And I am the Boys and Girls Club.
The Boys and Girls Club. We are the Boys and Girls! Like us on Facebook at BGC Midlands. Cox will donate $1 to the Boys and Girls Club.
My son, the Cub Scout, helped raise money to make camping safer.
My son, the Cub Scout, stood up to the school bully.
My son, the Cub Scout, volunteers at the homeless shelter.
My sons, the Boy Scouts, helped clean up after the devastating flood.
My son, the Eagle Scout, helped save a man's life.
My sons, the Eagle Scouts, are defending our nation.
My son, the Eagle Scout, became a doctor,
Civil engineer,
police chief,
wonderful husband and father,
State Senator.
JoinScouting2012.org.
Shirley Mora James. She is an attorney here in Lincoln, but she also specializes in immigration law. Shirley, we've got some laws. We have the Fremont law, but let me ask you, what do you think of the newly ruled Texas case that just happened?
Oh, farmers market. Yes, ironically, it should be noted that the ordinance in Fremont is exactly like the ordinance that was drafted in Farmers Branch. Now, Farmers Branch is a community in Texas, about 30,000, similarly situated as Fremont. And ironically or not ironically, Chris Kobach, who has benefited in this type of legislation, was also involved in that drafting. The Fifth Circuit ruled Monday that the ordinance is unconstitutional. Now, yes, the Eighth Circuit ruled recently about the Fremont case that it was constitutional to profile individuals and basically block them from housing. I don't see that any different than what Alabama was doing, where they were blocking immigrant families from accessing utilities, including water. What kind of country have we become?
We're talking families here. We're talking mothers, fathers, but we're talking about children. So if we have some of these laws, I can see a situation to where what we're saying is we're going to punish the kids because of the sins of the father. That old saying.
Yeah, and do we? I mean, if your father goes out and robs a bank, do we throw the kids in prison?
Now, how does this compare? We talked a little bit earlier about Pyle versus V. Doe. I think 1975, if I'm not mistaken, which basically guaranteed even undocumented children the right for K through 12. How does that ruling smash against? Well, you have the right to K through 12, but you don't have the right to housing. You don't have the right to utilities. Those things just don't seem to mesh. Because how are you going to go to school if you don't have water and you don't have a house to live in?
Or how are you going to survive?
Well, yeah, ultimately,
going to school.
Right, ultimately.
And you look at that, and if you closely examine that, what other group of people did we deny as a government through laws the opportunity for an education? African Americans, slaves, Native Americans and Mexican people in certain areas of this country were treated just the same. So now we are focusing on another group of people, and we are trying to deny them the ability to even access water, housing, and unfortunately, driver's license for the DACA recipients. Now, there has been a lawsuit filed against the Department of Motor Vehicles that is now in litigation.
That's here in Nebraska?
It's here in Nebraska. I represent Ann Melda, the Mexican American Legal Defense Fund, represent the plaintiff in that action. And what's so ironic is she happens to be a woman, a young lady. And what other country do we deny the right for women to drive? Saudi Arabia.
Those are some interesting, and another interesting conversation. But we did talk about earlier with the other gentleman that it seems to be, a question arose. We have an obvious undocumented person here in the United States, but yet they're allowed to have a driver's license issued by the state. To me, that seems a bit odd, that we recognize that you're an undocumented person in our country, but we're going to give you a state-issued ID so you can drive a car. Now, I understand the safety issue. You want people there with insurance and things like that, but isn't that an oxymoron that we recognize you're breaking the law, but we're going to give you a right?
Well,
or a privilege, rather. I mean, driving is a privilege.
Here in Nebraska, no one that's undocumented
that's true.
is going to get a driver's license.
That's true.
Even kids that are documented under DACA, who have been inspected, who have no criminal history, who have a social security number, who has a work permit, are denied a driver's license. So whoever made that statement is incorrect when it comes to Nebraska. In regards of allowing people the right to drive and a license, why wouldn't we want that? Why wouldn't we want them insured? Why wouldn't we want to know who's out there driving? It doesn't make any sense to not allow someone a driver's license that would make, to license that car, you got to have insurance.
True.
Okay? To buy that car, you got to pay taxes.
True.
And if you're paying taxes, you got to buy gas, and we know that's taxed to death.
I want to cover one of the things, because we talked about how undocumented workers, they pay in the taxes, whether they be sales tax or in some cases they pay the payroll taxes. Usually
they pay their income tax,
right?
And they do that through an IT number, okay, the individual tax number, which was set up for the purpose of them paying taxes.
So I guess the question I have for you: who has the ultimate responsibility? Is it that undocumented worker, or is it the person that hired them?
In regards to what?
Well, there's a lot of talk that we should be going after the business owners, the employers of undocumented workers, because they are just perpetuating the problem. That's an argument that's out there. Where do you see that?
I see individuals, especially companies that take advantage of undocumented workers, work them like dogs, and then threaten to call ICE on them so that they don't pay them, but they've gotten the work out of them. Absolutely need to go after those folks. Not a problem.
Quickly, would you agree that some employers don't know that they have undocumented workers? Is that a possibility?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, good. Because we don't want to say that every employer that happens to have an undocumented worker knows about it. Because there's ways. But I want to thank Shirley. I want to thank you for your time. Also want to thank Jeremy Aspen, Marty Brown, and Reynaldo Cervantes. Usually I end up our shows with my 2 cents, but as Shirley mentioned, nothing's better than coming from the mouths of babes. And what we want to show you now is actually a message from a successful dreamer here in Nebraska. So we'll see you next time on Viewpoint.
My name is Gustavo. I'm from Mexico, Guerrero. I'm here in the U.S. and I'm 21 years old. Well, I entered when I was 10. I had left friends behind, and then new words to me without knowing the language.
Well, I met them as an advocate in my community. I'm a Mason and Shriner, and I happened to meet Gustavo, which happened to be a kid that had a desire to want to educate and learn more. And so I kind of took him under my wing and began to share with him the importance of learning our culture as being here in America.
Well, I want to run my own business and then help others, and then see myself on the top by reaching, going to school. The school is the best thing that could get me in life.
It's just something in Gustavo that's, you know, rooted down with him. He has this work ethic that is unbelievable. He likes to work, he likes to read, he thinks everything over before he actually just go into it. He had a bunch of hardships in regards to where he was trying to go in life. It appears to me that Gustavo, like most of the young Latinos in his community, had a fear as far as identity, whether or not they'll have the opportunity to continue education, whether or not they'll have an opportunity to get a decent job without being exploited. And so those are some of my major concerns as well.
I couldn't get the chance to go to school. Now I'm in school. It's been great so far. Like, I couldn't get a better job because I had the right papers, and now it just seems I can do it all. I have a permit.
A permit?
Yeah, a permit.
So how's that feel?
Pretty nice. I mean, it seems like it's just a free world. I can go anywhere and freedom.
Well, I'm just proud to say today that, you know, I am so grateful to see that Gustavo has finally accomplished his goals by being patient and waiting for this opportunity because he was a little down, depressed, and nervous, and thinking the fact that he would be deported if he was to supply any of his information, although he's never been a troubled kid, never been incarcerated or any of that.
I mean, there was always this person that said, I'm not gonna make it. I mean, I put that together in mind, okay, but I don't wanna go there. I wanna see myself from the top. I've seen worse, but I wanna get better and see better.
I think it'd be beneficial to everyone as a whole. Why? Because here in America, this is a land of opportunity and freedom, providing that you go the right necessary steps. I think that everybody deserves the right for equal opportunity, education, and employment.